you, everybody.
Gratitude, sir, for being there, for being, taking out time to be here in the event. So, sir has his interest area in machine learning applications, and his research area is mainly on machine learning application in invasively recorded neural data for abnormality detections. Prior to pursuing PhD, he has been a machine learning intern at Spinblock SRL from March to September 2019. Currently, Sir is a PhD candidate at Nottingham University under the supervision of Dr. Mufti Mahmood Sir and Professor Ahmed Losti. I would now like to welcome Sir to the session, and Sir is going to speak on brain-computer interface. So over to you, Sir.
Hello, hi. Thank you for the presentation and the invitation to give this talk. I'm very thankful for the opportunity. I'll start sharing then my screen. Share sound. Share. Okay. We'll now begin the presentation, if that's okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the presentation named EEG-based brain-computer interface. An overview. I'm Marcos Favietti from Nottingham University. And the contents of today's work are going to be what is brain-computer interfaces, starting with a definition, potential users, applications, limitations, classification, and history. We'll follow by neural signals, which even though you've had a brief introduction by Dr. Mahmoud on the basics of it, we'll just briefly go over them. So the different types of neural signals, why we use electroencephalography, what is electroencephalography, and the different types. Also, the frequency bands that can be acquired from the signal. Third, the processing pipeline, that is starting from the acquisition of the signal all the way to the feedback of the device, starting with paradigms, followed by pre-processing, feature extraction, feature selection, and classification. We continue with open data sets for those looking to implement some models of your own, and the applications module, including the software and hardware open access platforms. Coming to an end, we'll discuss a bit of the challenges in the area, some future trends, a summary, a quick notion of the bibliography, and then we'll have an approximately 10-minute Q&A session. For those who have some questions, please write them down in the chat or somewhere, and we can discuss them at the end. Right, let's start with the definition, extracted from the reference module in biomedical science. A brain-computer interface is a system that measures the activity of the central nervous system and converts it into artificial output that replaces, restores, enhances, supplements, or improves natural CNS output, and thereby changes the ongoing interactions between the central nervous system and its internal environment. This definition incorporates other notions than controlling a big exoskeleton that we usually come to mind when we're thinking about BCI devices. Instead, BCI has a wide range of applications that we'll see in the following slides. In the picture, we see a woman controlling a BCI device to be able to drink some water, and underneath we see a man using an EEG-based BCI to close the grip on our external prosthesis. Right, potential BCI users. When thinking of BCI, we associate it with someone that possesses a disability or disease, such as amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, paralysis, stroke, cerebral palsy, spinal cord injury, muscular dystrophies, prosthetic users, someone who suffers from Parkinson's disease, or locked-in syndrome. Nonetheless, the use of BCI is evolving, and now it's also being considered for users without health-related difficulties. So a common person will benefit from them. For example, an immersive gaming experience, or controlling a device such as the computer just with their thoughts alone. Speaking of applications, here we see a few examples on screen. The first one, communication, is very useful for people with locked-in syndrome or have that possess trouble communicating. We see in the first picture up left a speller, which allows someone based on the stimulus of the screen to write a word or a sentence. Locomotion, we see in the picture next to it, someone using an EEG-based control wheelchair to move around. Environmental control, this includes the use of brain signals to control the environment, especially in the house, such as shades, lights, or other systems within the house. Movement control, as we shown earlier, the uses of a prosthesis. Neurorehabilitation, when someone has suffered a stroke, the BCI can help that person regain the sensory feedback and strengthen and recover the functions lost. Lastly, entertainment. There are now a new wave of applications, game center, so people can control games with just the signal of their brain. Now moving on to classification. We can classify the BCI based on the purpose. If it is to replace function, such as stroke or other diseases that people lose their motor function or their ability to speak, if the BCI helps restore functions in the sense of rehabilitations, using signal to control assistive devices such as assistive robots or muscle stimulators. It can be used to improve functions. For example, wearable EEG devices can be used for health improvements such as stroke rehabilitation. To enhance function, for example, with a co-learning environment, the user engagement can be increased and the user can gain detailed information about his neural activity in the sense that an EEG BCI can help a user know when he's more concentrated and that way improve his productivity. Lastly, but not least, research. As BCI have been used in other fields, rather neuroscience, such as marketing, to improve sales. So it's becoming a wide application. Another way to classify a BCI is based on the signal they use or the activity the user performs. In regards to the signal, we have two types, invasive and non-invasive. The difference is if there's any surgical procedure done to the patient, such as electrocorticography, neural spikes, or local field potentials, which we'll see in a few slides ahead. And non-invasive, such as magnetoencephalography or EEG, that in those cases, no invasive, the electrodes are either on the scalp or above it, so there's nothing invasive done to the patient. And the other one is the activity, in the sense that we have three types of activities. An active BCI requires the user to perform a mental task, which is then used as a command for the BCI application. A reactive BCI operates via the mental strategy of selective attention. They make use of the brain activity that occurs as a result of an individual's voluntary focused attention on a specific external stimuli. A passive BCI does not require voluntary task. The user brain activity is simply measured when it's confronted with certain tasks. Passive BCIs are used to examine cognitive states, such as attention or sleep. Right. So let's look at a little bit of the history of BCI. In the year 1924, the EEG was first developed by a German scientist, Hans Berger. By the year 1970s, the term BCI was first coined by a UCLA professor, And by the year 1990, a wireless D-electrode for operation in the brain was developed. In the year 2003, we have the first BCI game and the first BCI implanted in a human. In the year 2008, we have the development of ambient audio, nerve tapping neckband for voiceless phone calls. In the year 2006, we have the first communication between a human and a computer. And also the development of Neuralink, which is very popular because it was funded by Elon Musk in the hopes of developing an ultra-high bandwidth brain-machine interface to connect humans and computers. As you can see, the first at the beginning, the pacing was 50, 30 years, and now progress is being made every 5 years. So technology is advancing a lot quicker. And nowadays, what we have, this is the current state. The first one is Neuralink. Elon Musk computer brain interface has released a video game and shows a monkey playing the video game just with his mind at the Pong minigame. The brain signals were sent wirelessly via an implanted device within the monkey's brain. And then we have 2 other companies. The NextMind, which is a commercial BCI, a sensor that reads the electrical signals from the brain's visual cortex and translate into input signals for a PC. So it allows to control devices. And lastly, Neurable is a full stack neurotechnology tool that interprets human intent, emotion, and telekinetic control of the digital world. So it's an everyday headphones that measures the brain activity and allows for optimization of focus habits. Right, so let's go back a little to neural signal. There are different neural signals based on the depth of the acquisition. We have magnetoencephalography, electroencephalography, which are non-invasive, and functional MRI, as we see on the first image. And then invasively, we have electrocorticography, local field potentials, and spikes. As we can see, these images have a spatial temporal resolution that varies with each method. Obviously, the ones more invasive have a better spatial resolution because they're deep within the cortex compared to magnetoencephalography or electroencephalography that just capture the activity within the cortex. We can see the image here, the different bandwidths and the frequency. So EEG is between 5 and 300 microvolts and approximately less than 100 hertz. Electrocorticography is from 0.01 to 5 millivolts and less than 200 hertz. Local field potentials are less than 1 millivolt and are less than 200 hertz, and spikes are approximately 500 microvolts and from 1 to 7K hertz. So we increase the frequency, that is the temporal resolution, the deeper we go. The counter side of it is that it's an invasive procedure which can potentially harm the user. So that's why we expect to use non-invasive technologies. Right. So why do we use electroencephalography? The pros is that it provides the most required information about the brain activity. It's efficient in diagnosing some diseases such as coma, encephalopathies, and brain death. It is quite inexpensive, which is one of the benefits of employing this technology, and can be replicated with open source and 3D printing. There are no harmful side effects, as it's just acquisition outside the brain and it's non-invasive. There's no need for injecting any electrical signal, such as other invasive techniques may have. The voltage is restricted to the measuring device, that is that there is no interaction between the brain and the recording system. And most importantly, is a portable device, which is very helpful for outside lab settings. The cons is that it doesn't help with brain imaging. However, this is not very important for brain-computer interfaces. It does not provide the image of the brain cross-section. That means it doesn't give a clear map of everything. It's just picks up the electrical activity on a low resolution area. It is quite susceptible to noise, but that's why there are computational techniques developed to solve this that will look a bit ahead, and has a low spatial resolution because which is on the centimeter range as it's on the scalp level. So what is EEG? EEG is an electrophysiological monitoring method to record the electrical activity on the scalp that has shown to represent the macroscopic activity of the surface layer of the brain underneath. Typically, the EEG follows the 10-20 placement. It refers to specific anatomic landmarks or interelectrode distance such that it is 10 to 20% in the front to back or right to left head perimeters. We see on screen that this way, regardless of the person, we can map out a regular spaced location for each electrode. Furthermore, it comes with a nomenclature that each point to place an electrode is denoted by a letter, which tells the lobe, for example, C central, F frontal, T temporal, P parietal, O occipital, and a letter and a number to denote the position. And here on screen are just a brief picture of the different signals acquired, which might not make a lot of sense, and they might look quite similar. However, they do represent the different activities in the different regions, and there are some differences to them. Great. What types of EEG are there? Well, the classification of EEG is mainly done through their electrodes. We have dry EEG, which is no substance, semi-dry, which is tap water humidity, and wet EEG, which is silent solutions or gel. Passive electrodes are used to measure the signals that are mostly used of silver and silver chloromalloy. Although the electrodes are small, they're very sensitive to noise and cable variation. So the gel and glues are used for better conductivity to reduce the impedance of skin electrode contact. The problem of the gel or liquid is just that it dries over time. So more advanced technological advances can be made with dry electrodes, which are made of materials such as conductive foams, spring electrode fingers, micromachine structures, conductive rubber, conductive carbon nanotubes, and bristle structure. So yeah, the main classification is how the electrode is composed, and because the technology changes based on it. And while it's more simple using the electrodes in the sense that you don't need to use a paste, the resolution of wet EEG is significantly better until the technology improves a bit. Right. Now we'll look at the different frequency bands. The electroencephalography is usually described on activity types, which are rhythmic activities and transients. The rhythmic activities are divided into certain frequency bands. These bands are proved to have certain biological significance or certain distribution over the scalp. The delta seems to be the highest in amplitude and the slowest wave that is associated with deep sleep and wake-up states. Theta has an amplitude greater than 20 microvolts and fall within the range of 4 to 7 hertz. Theta is generated with idling, creative inspiration, unconscious material, drowsiness, and sleep meditation. The alpha is a wave with the amplitude from 50 to 30 microvolts and a frequency between 8 to 13 hertz. It is usually associated with relaxation, concentration, and sometimes inattention. Mu is found in the alpha wave frequency when the recorded amplitude over motor cortex is maximal. It is usually associated with suppression that indicates that the motor neurons are working. Beta is associated with alert, thinking, and active concentration, and falls within the 12 to 30 hertz. Finally, gamma can be detected at the somatory cortex with frequency higher than 30 hertz. It is shown during the short-term memory matching of recognized objects, sound, or tactile sensation. In other words, when someone is focused. We see the different waveforms in the screen. Obviously, as the higher frequency we go, the more wavy the signals appear, while at lower resolutions, it's just quite a slower wave. And each one of them are captured on different parts of the brain which are associated with them. So they appear more clear in certain positions. Okay, we're moving on to the processing pipeline, which means how the things start from the user, go through the signal acquisition, pre-processing, feature extraction and selection, classification, the application module, and feedback, that goes back to the user. So what are paradigms? To implement an EEG-based BCI system for a particular application, a specific protocol and paradigm has to be chosen for all phases of the experiment. First, the subject performs a particular task in order to learn how to modulate direct brain activity, while EEG signals are recorded from the scalp. During the recorded EEG as training data, a neural decoder for the paradigm is generated. Afterwards, the subject performs the task again. The neural decoder is used for BCI control. So basically what it means is doing a specific task which allows the system to modulate the brain activity. We'll now see the different types. We have ERD, event-related desynchronization, ERP, event-related potentials, SSVP, steady state visual potentials, auditory steady state response, slow cortical potentials, sensory-motor oscillations, and various hybrid systems. I'll now briefly go over that. Event-related desynchronization is a relative power decrease of electroencephalography in a specific frequency band during motor execution and mental motor imagery. That is, imagining the activity you would do with, for example, closing a hand. Event-related potentials are very small voltages generated on the brain structure in response to specific events or stimuli such as audio and visual. One of the most popular is the P300, which is a positive deflection in the EEG that appears approximately 300 milliseconds after the presentation of an attended stimulus. The steady state evoked potentials are signals that are natural responses to visual stimulation at specific frequency, such as when the retina is excited by the visual stimulus from 3.5 to 75 hertz. An auditory ready state response is an electrophysiological response that is evoked by a periodically repeated auditory stimulus. Slow cortical potentials are generated in the cortex. These potentials occur over 0.5 to 10 seconds, and they are associated with movement and planning of motor activity. So if someone can control the slow cortical potentials, they can control movements of an object on a computer screen. Sensory-motor oscillations are beta oscillations between 13 to 30 hertz that are commonly implicated in the sensory-motor process. These oscillations are established during stable postures and are decreased during active states, such as movement planning and execution. So yeah, we have all these signals. Some of them are evoked. That means that they need an external stimuli to happen. Another are naturally within the body, such as those are called steady state. And we can see in the table on screen These have different characteristics. Some are, for example, visual evoked potentials are based on visual cortex. They have different transfer rate, so the amount of bits per minute, the highest one being the visual, while the other ones might be smaller. Obviously, the more transfer rate we have, the better for controlling the BCI device. Some do require training. That's where the paradigm comes in, which is kind of teach the person how to modulate their brain activity and to focus on the task. And of course, with this, so there are some difficulties because a person doing it voluntarily, this task can get tired, and long training times are a downside to some techniques. And some, for example, need more attention. So there are pitfalls to all of them. And up on the screen, we see a woman trying to write with speller and how the modulated error is used as feedback to the system and improve it. Now we'll see a quick video of a paradigm.
Hi, this is Eric from Neuromatrix Entertainment, and today we're going to talk about getting your brain to generate patterns for brain-computer interfaces, or BCI, or at least how to induce one. As you may recall from our other introductory videos, link in the description, brain-computer interfaces give users a way to influence their environment by specific brain patterns. To elucidate these patterns, we typically utilize specific stimuli known as synchronous or asynchronous BCI. We're going to focus on synchronous BCI systems here. Synchronous BCI use cue-based systems with predefined timeframes to give stimulus to the user, like a set of flashing lights. So how can these brain patterns be generated using flashing lights? There are several different ways to pull this off, but today, our main focus will be on a widely used and easily implemented natural response called the P300, or positive 300 millisecond response. The P300 works off one of the brain's reactions to surprising and unexpected stimulus. Ready? I just use an auditory stimulus to evoke the P300 response in you, just then. See, your brain always categorizes new random events as something interesting. So as you were paying attention to the silence and a random sound occurred, it initiated the well-known pattern, the P300, in your brain. This is also known as the oddball paradigm, which you don't really need to know, but it's pretty neat. Consistent with this pattern, 300 milliseconds after an event, the EEG would pick up a positive peak in amplitude. Therefore, if you're paying attention to two separate tones, like this, and one of them shifts, then your brain's response can tell us which one you were paying attention to. Pretty cool, huh? The P300 will always happen regardless of what type of stimulus is present. And that is what we're going to exploit for game jams. We will be using flashing objects to elicit the P300 response visually, and in turn, directly control some aspect of the game. Thank you for checking out this video, briefly explaining the P300.
Okay, that was P300, and now we'll look at motor imagery, which is a person imagining a task. See, she's starting with her hand. Now she does it with her other hand. She's recreating the activity. Now with her brain. So while she's thinking of recreating the activity, she does it of moving her hand around. And now the other hand. And now a control system can be used where you either detecting the right or left can move a car, for example. So if she focuses and thinks about moving her right hand, that can be used to control a car on a small minigame. That's called motor imagery paradigm. So now we move into the pre-processing. The downside of using electroencephalography is that it's quite susceptible to noise. And there is not a limit to how much the improvement of an electrode or hardware can do to solve it. Not only EEG, all the neural signals, when recorded, are susceptible to external and internal noise. Many of these signals and the noises have similar spatial temporal characteristics, which makes them difficult to remove using conventional methods. This means that a lot of processing must be done to the signal in order to obtain useful data. There are many sources of noise referred to as artifacts, which can be of physiological or environmental and methodological origin. In the first category, we find ocular, such as eye movement and eye blink, cardiac, such as the ECG from the heart, and muscular, such as the muscle activity from the head and neck. Other ones include skin potentials or respiration sources. In artificial origin, such as not from within the body, can be transmission line, such as the 60 Hz line, cell phone signals, light stimulation, movement, electrode poor contact, popping, and lead movement. Each artifact has a distinct amplitude and frequency band that overlap with the desired neural information. We can see on the table below the different frequency bands for each specific artifact. So we have ocular, 3 to 10 Hertz, which are mainly on the front. Electro ECG, which is the heart, 1.2 Hertz. Electromyography has quite a big range from 0 to 200 Hertz, which poses a problem because that overlaps with the EEG signal. And respiration, 5 to 10 Hertz. We also have external, such as the power line noise, 50 to 60 Hertz, and instrumental are very low frequency components, such as movement of the cables. We'll see now a quick video of someone generating artifacts with his eyes. We can see how him shifting his eye around generates electric potential that it's also picked up by the electroencephalography. And now that it's closed, it's removed. And how, for example, moving the muscles in his brain or clenching his jaw also generates this, and even moving his ears, generate distortions in the signal. So what are some artifact removal methods? Well, the first one is discarding the segment. However, that generates lots of information, which is highly undesirable because we want to keep as much information as possible. The other one is filtering. For example, when we have the power line, which is 50 Hertz, and it's just a specific band that we know, we can easily filter it. However, when we have an artifact such as muscle, which were 200 Hertz, it's effective in those cases. Another one can be template removal. That is when artifacts have a unique shape, and come from a known specific source, it can be approximated and subtracted to restore the neural signal. However, most of the times, artifacts are quite different in shape and have many sources, so it's not very effective. Another technique is regression or adaptive filtering. A regression method begins by defining the amplitude relationship between the reference channel and a neural signal using transmission factors, and then removing the estimated artifacts from the signal. So the limitation with this technique is that it requires an additional channel per artifact to remove. So you would need one extra channel for the ECG, one extra channel for the muscles, and extra channels for the eye blinks. So it complicates the setups quite a lot. Then we have the compositions, such as independent component analysis or wavelet, and the major, which they decompose into different frequency bands, and then you can remove the frequency bands that are, or components that are artifactual to restore the true signal underneath. But the problem is that they cannot remove artifacts completely if the spectral properties of the measure signal overlap with the spectral properties of the artifact. Again, it's quite a problem when the temporal components of both of them overlap. And lastly, advanced computational methods such as independent component analysis related and machine learning models have been applied to deal with artifacts. We'll be looking a bit more at machine learning more ahead, but for BCI decoding. Another way to deal with artifacts is with multimodality. That is similar to regression in the sense that by using reference signals, we can remove the artifacts. In our paper we evaluated how the different signals can be incorporated into EEG systems. The conclusion was outside gyroscopes and accelerators that most BCI devices come with nowadays. The other ones, there have been such an advance in computational techniques that not much of them are needed. However, nonetheless, if they're available, it's good to use. We also evaluated different methods for artifact detection and removal. We have some of on screen, and we created an app for it. Well, we see that the most common type is electroencephalography, the signal used to study artifacts. The most common artifacts are ocular and muscular, and the most popular machine learning techniques used to deal with artifacts are neural networks and support vector machines. We'll be looking at more of this in the talk on Wednesday that I'll be giving. So if you're interested in this topic, please attend that. Right, feature extraction. And for classification models, need sometimes a simplified version of the information, in the sense that the complex form of the signal is a bit complicated for some algorithms to process. Therefore, some way of simplifying the information by extracting features allows classification systems to work. There are mainly four classes of features for EEG. One is time domain, one is frequency domain, and then combinations of them, such as wavelet, and then spatial, which takes into consideration the spatial mapping of the electrons. Let's quickly just go over them a little. Time domain features include autoregressive features, that is autoregressive modeling, statistical features, which can be mean, standard deviation, power of the signal, and skewness. Horth features such as activity, mobility, and complexity, and others. In regards to frequency domain components, we have the Fourier transform, of course, the energy per band, absolute and relative, as well as ratios. And then going to time frequency domain, we have the Gabor features, the Hilbert-Huang transform, and the wavelet transform, or the short time Fourier transform, where we have representations of the signal, which play with the spatial frequency resolution. Lastly, spatial features, we have common spatial patterns and functional connectivity. So all of these are features that extracted from the EEG signal give information to a model about the different characteristics of it and can be used to train a classifier. Now, we'll look at the concept of sliding window, which is a very commonly used technique. If we have this chunk of EEG signal, a sliding window, what does is that we take a portion, let's say 5 seconds, and then slide it over. And then we have another 5-second example. So that way we are classifying every X number of steps the signal. We just don't classify the whole segment. Another way that can be done is by overlapping segments, which means that instead of moving completely and having no overlap, there is some overlap between the previous state. What does it, for example, in this case, 50%. What does this do? Well, with no overlap, in this 30-second segment, we can get 6 examples to train a model. If we use 50% overlap, we can get 11 examples. And if we get 80% overlap, we have 25 examples. And this is commonly used when trying to generate more examples to train a model. Right. So imagine you've taken all of the features we saw 2 screens ago. If you extract a lot of features, maybe you're in the order of 100, 200, or 1,000 features. However, not all of them have rich information for the model. So there are different techniques to find the best subset of features. There's the filter approach, the wrapper approach, and the embedded approach. The filter approach selects the best subset of features outside a machine learning algorithm. It looks at the features by themselves without considering the classification algorithm. Then we have the wrapper method, which generates a subset of features and trains an algorithm. And it continuously trains algorithms with different subsets until it finds the best subset of features for that algorithm. And lastly, the embedded approach, which is that some machine learning methods in the techniques themselves incorporate some form of selecting features, such as decision trees, which look at the information gain by adding each subset of features. So here we see some different types of filter techniques, such as we have in the filtering type, we have information gain, chi-square test, Fisher score, correlation coefficient, variance threshold. Of the wrapper type, we have recursive feature elimination, sequential feature selection algorithms, and genetic algorithms. Embedded, lasso regularization and decision trees, and dimensionality reactions such as principal component analysis. Which one works best? Well, it kind of depends on what you're trying to do. Filter are quite fast and computationally efficient, but it doesn't guarantee that a classifier will have good performance. The wrapper type, it does do that, but however, it's a bit more prone to overfitting. That means that it's won't be able to generalize with other examples as well, and needs expensive computation. And the embedded is that it's limited specifically to a few machine learning methods. So what are these machine learning methods? Well, they are algorithms that can improve their performance using training data. Typically, an algorithm has a large number of parameters whose values are learned from data. They can be applied in situations where it is very challenging to define rules based by hand, such as face detection, speech recognition, stock prediction, or in our case, motor imagery or decoding brain activity. Well, but when we think about machine learning and artificial intelligence, we always think of these very complex systems. However, I imagine most of you are familiar with linear regression. Well, linear regression is a form of artificial intelligence in the sense that given a cloud of points or examples, once we fit a curve for any new value x, we can predict a new value y. So you can say that it has learned from the data, right? So this is classified as one of the machine learning techniques. So among machine learning techniques, there are 3 main types of learning. The first one is supervised learning, which use labeled data. So we know what the data is. For example, if we have a handwriting, we know, for example, if it's a 1 or a 7, we know what we're seeing. We have direct feedback of how well the model works. That is, we know how accurate it is, and we mainly use it to predict an outcome. For example, the relationship between weight versus height. And supervised learning, we don't have the label and we don't have any feedback. It's mainly used to find structures in data. For example, in the screen, we have 3 different groups of data that we originally don't know what these classes are or what they represent. But we can use algorithm to find how many classes are there, and that can help us analyze the data. And lastly, reinforcement learning, which is we're using an agent in an environment to learn how to perform a specific task via a reward system. The image in the screen is a Google DeepMind AI teaching itself how to walk. We haven't told this, for example, here, how to walk. We just tell him, try to get to from point A to point B in the most efficient manner. And from that, the system starts learning. In BCI, the majority of the tasks are supervised learning because we know, for example, if we think about a task, we're trying to get a system to predict when the person does the task. And we know we have the information of what task the person was trying to do and the feedback it gets. So it's mainly supervised learning. Another subset of machine learning is called deep learning, which is very popular. Deep learning, it's a step beyond deep learning, if you will, that the process of feature extraction that we saw a few slides ago, it's incorporated in the system. That means that deep learning models called neural networks have the capability to extract the features themselves from the data and learn from them. These neural networks are inspired by the biological model, as we see up here on screen. It's very inspired to how it works, and even has the activation function similar as to how the neuron depolarizes. And not only that, we have also developed a lot of the technology. For example, convolutional neural networks are based on the receptive fields on how the eye works. So there's a lot of biologically inspired computing. So what's the relationship of the classification models in BCI? Well, here's just a brief description of them. Linear discriminant analysis is very simple to use. However, it's not very suitable for the complex EEG data. Support vector machines are quite good at generalizing, but struggle a bit with handling dynamic nature of the signal. That is that the signals evolve and change a lot over time. And then neural networks are basically the state of the art. That's what it's mostly used because once trained, they're very efficient. However, the downside is that the neural networks take a lot of computational power to train. And the image on the right, we can see the different neural network architectures, the most in BCI studies. The most predominant ones are convolutional neural networks, recurrent neural networks, and hybrid convolutional neural networks, with 73% for convolutional neural networks and 13% for hybrid CNNs and 14% the rest. So we can see a majority, the majority of it is convolutional neural networks because they are mainly used for multi-channel activities and can be used to look at spectral properties as well. Right. So performance, how are we evaluating the performance of the system? Well, there are different ways to evaluate the performance of a BCI system. The accuracy most widely used performance evaluation, which measures the performance algorithm in terms of predicting the correct target class trials. Accuracy metrics are mostly employed when the number of trials for the classes are equal and there are no bias towards a particular class. In the case of unbiased or unequal number of classes, Cohen's kappa coefficient is used, where the kappa coefficient equates the observed accuracy with respect to an expected accuracy, so against the random chance. Sensitivity can be used to identify the percentage of correctly classified trials from each task class. And as BCI can be interpreted as a communication channel between the user and the machine, the information transfer rate of each trial can be calculated in order to measure the bit rate of the system. In regards to the user encoding capabilities, the BCI can be defined as an encoder-decoder system where the user encodes information in the EEG signal and the BCI decodes it into commands. Stability metrics measure how stable EEG patterns are produced by a user. And it is done by measuring the average distance between each trial task covariance matrix and the mean covariance matrix for the specific task. Okay, let's say you wanted to do some research of your own in this area. Where could you find the information for it? Well, there are different repositories, such as the neuroscience-specific data repositories, such as OpenNeuro and the Dandy Archive. There are general-purpose data repositories, such as Zenodo, Open Science Framework, Figshare, Dryad, Gnode, Open Data, and Kaggle. There are data journals, which are journals specific to publishing datasets, such as Scientific Data, Data in Brief, and GigaScience. And where to look? Well, I'd recommend GitHub. It's always a good source. We'll be looking at some of them now. And also, Google has a new tool, which is Dataset Search, which allows to search specific datasets across the web. I've also collected several GitHub pages, which have BCI-related information. So we have the first one, which is the collection of EEG datasets and the different tasks. So we have, for example, motor imagery, emotion recognition, and visual evoked potentials. We have another dataset, another GitHub page, which also collects several datasets and explains the different characteristics of it. We have MoApp, which is an app for state-of-the-art BCI techniques. And that also includes not only datasets, but also techniques and apps for it. So the idea of this is to benchmark, that is to get the best score we can across a standard set of datasets. Then we have BNCI Horizon, again, which is a collection of datasets and their description. All of these are publicly available and free to download. And we have this list, which includes going from software for BCI, hardware from BCI, brain databases, tutorials, community, competitions, and papers. So it's a very curated list of BCI-related content. In regards to the hardware platform, we see on screen 9 popular devices, which include Neuroski, Emotive, OpenBCI, and Neuro, GTech, Cognionics, Cremedical, Interaction, and another model of Cognionics. It is interesting to notice that some of them use dry electrodes and others use wet electrodes. The amount of channels goes from a single channel up to 256. The sampling rate is kind of standard across all of them because we need a good temporal resolution. So with sampling rate in general goes from above 500 Hertz. And lastly, the Bluetooth technology is the most used data transfer due to the energy efficiency of it. And the imaging on the screen correspond to the numbers in the table. So this is Neuroski, this is Emotive, OpenBCI, which is open access. So we can see this person has developed this EEG recording device with 3D printed parts. 5 is on Neuro. We have GTech. We have Cognionics. We have Cremedical, Interaction, and lastly, wet Cognionics device. In regards to the different software and platforms, we have compiled them on screen as well. We have BCI 200, OpenVibe, Toby, BCI Lab, BCI++, XBCI, BF++, PIF, OpenBCI. They all have different programming languages, compatible with different operating system and characteristics. OpenBCI was BCI 2000 is developed in C++, compatible with all operating devices, has good documentation, simple setup and deployment, and includes tool for timing behavior. OpenVibe, it's developed in Python and Lua, provides modular software, reusable components, and based on portable software. Toby was developed in C++, and it's able to integrate different BCI tools. BCI Lab, which is very popular, and this one on screen, has emphasis on evaluation techniques and has a couple state-of-the-art algorithm and techniques and supports real-time and offline applications. BCI++, also developed in C++, use a system in simplifies interfacings and support different types of acquisition devices. XBCI is developed in C++, and it's highly extendability and flexible and quite easy to use. BF++ provides a unique and reliable performance metric and suitable descriptions. PIF was developed in Python, and it facilitates the reproducibility of published results and promotes standardization of feedback. And lastly, OpenBCI is a centralized system with multiplex server, supports parallel hybrid BCI, and facilitates the communication between OpenBCI and external modules. Right. So let's talk a little bit about the processing challenges. Well, we have challenges in regards to feature extraction, classification, signal interpretability, the hardware, the BCI functioning, and the modality. The EEG signal is usually very noisy and time variable. Therefore, it's challenging to extract relevant features from EEG in a very short time window. As we see in when we have a subset of features, selecting the subject-specific characteristics, it's quite difficult, and also the number of components to be chosen in feature selection as well So we have to not only pick the best subset of features for the model, but the best that adjust to the subject, so the user. In regards to classification, we need robust classifiers that consider the user in the loop. That means the systems that evolve over time. So the classifiers need to be robust for the many tasks and also the many users if they're not user specific. The signal interpretability, that means that a lot of machine learning algorithms are very hard to interpret. So there are new techniques that are being developed in order to make them understandable. In regard to hardware, how to use energy efficient algorithms, that way they're portable. How to collect data and gathering data from an individual subject in an optimal way, in the sense that we don't want the user to tire. So the minimum information required and attention needed. BCI functioning, again, the long calibration time, which is one of the downsides of BCI. And signal processing in multi-class classification, when we're used, the BCI is used for different tasks. In regards to the modality, which is the EEG, is that the high dimensionality of the EEG can be complicated, especially if it's acquired in many channels. So it's quite a big thing to process. The EEG has low signal to noise ratio, so we need to optimize how to remove the noise and remove it. And now, coming closer to an end, we have the general challenges. So that starts with BCI standards. There's a lack on the BCI community in developing standards for BCI systems. For instance, EEG practice involves tedious procedures for capturing the brain signals, including the gel liquid electrode. And although the dry electrode may be a solution, there still vary from device to device. So, and the devices sometimes are not compatible between each other and the software. So it's kind of difficult to advance when there is no a standard among the technology. Another challenge is the participation of patients. So participant training is required for a user to use the BCI, otherwise it can lead to unstable signal classification. And however, the user might get tired over time and be unwilling to participate in using the system. Sorry. Electrophysiological issues, which are mainly non-linearity and non-stationarity. First one, that the brain itself is non-linear, so we need non-linear classifiers such as neural networks to deal with it. Linear classifiers usually don't perform well. And the second one, it's is that they're dynamic in the sense that they evolve over time, and a single person, for example, goes through a disease or age in itself. So systems need to be able to adapt to the different needs at the brain signal of a person. Information transfer rate, in the sense that it's one of the most used performance metrics of BCI systems, which are three factors that affect it, such as the target detection accuracy, the number of classes, and the target detection time. So individual measures must be taken for each one of them to enhance it. Sensor issues is that, while dry electrodes are an improvement over wet electrodes because they simplify the procedure, they still need to be improved with a minimum signal to noise ratio and high information transfer rate. So there's still a lot to be developed there. Real life applications, in the sense that the cost of BCI is quite high. However, as we have seen, there have now been development of commercial products. So there's real improvement and starting to be used in day-to-day life, in the sense of, for example, gaming and concentration. Ethical and security. So There's an ongoing research on both privacy and security of BCI in order to protect the user's data and confidentiality. And lastly, the agreement on the future of the BCI, as there is such a rich and multidisciplinary field. We have technicians, biologists, psychologists. There is no one direction. Also, we also need to consider the subjects that are using it and the companies. So getting everyone on the same page as to where BCI is going is still quite a challenge. So future trends. So where is the BCI going? Well, the first one would be user-centric application. So it is expected to move the BCI applications from device-centric to user-centric, in which the user needs, wants, and limitations will be taken into consideration in all of the BCI design and implementation process. Smart electrodes. In the next few years, we'll see smart electrodes involving computational intelligence techniques that can adapt automatically based on the user behaviors and positions. The user confidence means that the users believe in the BCI and its future. Looking at the survey done for users about BCI, the user expectation is very high. Therefore, it is expected more users to be willing to participate in BCI activities and applications. Beyond medical applications, nowadays BCI applications are going further than just the limited applications. We can see, for example, in spelling control and prototypes for gaming. Cloudy BCI. We're currently in the era of cloud computing, and the most computer applications, especially with the ones with the heavy computational, are moving towards cloud computing. So this could help reduce the processing done in the devices and improving portability. And lastly, BCI in a box. One of the leading factors in any field is the ready-made applications where the user or researcher can use the BCI with minimum effort. And this is one of the directions that we expect the next few years to have a great impact on the field of BCI research. So to sum up, the field of BCI is one of the important fields that deal with the brain activities. Their interest in the BCI field is expected to increase, and the BCI design and development will, in all probability, continue to bring benefits to the daily lives of people. Thanks to the rapidly growing computational power and novelty sense of development, there is a large area of applications, such as gains and mental state monitoring. A wide variety of signal features and classification algorithms have been tested in BCI design, and as long as machine learning techniques are continuously being developed, the better it will be for the BCI as well. And despite the recent advances in the BCI field, there's still some issues that still need to be solved. So basically, this is the bibliography. It's around 27 pages, 2 articles, and 3 YouTube videos, which I've taken to prepare these slides, which you can look up because I've sent the presentations. And thank you. My contact is on screen, whether you want to write me an email or contact me through LinkedIn. I'm always welcome if you have some questions outside the chat. We have finished a bit earlier, but that means we can have a little bit more time for Q&A.
Absolutely. So I would request the participants to write your query in the chat box. Though there are some, requests from Lata G. So the request is, I registered as a research scholar during the registration. Okay. Oh, no, that's not related to this. It is about the attendance though. Yeah, there are some participation, there's some word of appreciation for you. Yeah, so yeah, those are here. But I would request the participants to write your queries in the chat box, or else you can also unmute. So I request Professor Tufan to allow the participants to be, able to unmute and ask questions. Also, I would request you to write in the in the chat box. If you have any query, please go ahead, write in the chat box, or else you can also unmute and share your queries.
Good evening, sir. Good
Hello.
evening, sir. I am Sangeeta from SRM University, sir. I have a simple question that can we implement, is it possible for us to implement a novel feature extraction algorithm using ECG signals, EEG signals for identifying the stress? Is it possible for us to write any novel algorithm, novel feature extraction algorithm?
Yeah, I mean, there's continuous development over features. There are toolboxes made specifically just for feature extraction in time series. The thing is with it's all about finding the ones that are useful for your domain. So there's a lot of research done in saying among the many features you can extract for the signal, which ones are the most relevant for this specific task, such as stress detection, for example. So yeah, there's quite a lot of room for improvement, especially if paired with a classifier. If you can show that your the features you're proposing improve the state of the art, yeah, that's something an interesting research topic.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your answer.
Thank you for your question. What is the best way to measure brain-machine interface? I'm not sure the question. I'll kind of quickly show the slides again. Here, it kind of depends what you're trying to measure. If we're trying to evaluate the performance of the BCI, so the device, and how good it decodes the activity, in the sense, you know what the person is thinking, what kind of goal he's trying to achieve, how well is the BCI translating that output. And the other thing is the user encoding capabilities, which is, if you look at the system as a whole, like an encoder and decoder, the stability of the signal generated by the user, and the difference among the outputs based on the task. In general, for BCI systems, it's either the information transfer rate or the accuracy, from what I've seen. If we're trying to compare, for example, the machine learning decoding outputs. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the answer.
In feature selection filter method, how we calculate ANOVA or other by hand means using formulas. Well, technically nowadays you don't have to measure by hand, in the sense that if you use a programming language, either it be C, Python, or MATLAB, currently there are functions written or libraries made, which once you have your set of examples or filter signals, you can run the statistical tests. You don't need to use, for example, go back to Excel or Stata to run them. Just with computational language, you can do it. People nowadays don't usually do hand statistical analysis. Sir, do we have any hands-on session in the next parts of BCI? That would be more interesting, as in doing practically how to extract features, classify, and train the models. I agree with that. Sadly, we've just done this, which is basically a presentation, an introduction for you to get a notion of what is BCI, what are the systems, and how are they composed of. Hopefully, because I have sent the slides with the sources I've added, which include different data sets and different pipelines, you can go to GitHub and look at already made notebooks. So you can just run them and start getting into these BCI applications. Thank you for the question.
So if there's any further questions, please go ahead. You can post in the chat box or you can unmute yourself and directly ask the question. So participants, I would request, if you have any more questions, you can go ahead, write in the post, in the chat box. Otherwise, you can unmute yourself and directly ask the question to sir. And I would like to say thank you to you for answering the questions of the participants so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. No problem.
So yeah, if there's any more questions, we can take it up. We still have some more time. And please go ahead, post your question, or you can unmute and ask the question directly to. Okay, so I do not still see any questions so far, but yes, there are so many interaction that's happening, towards the end. So I believe if they had any question, they would definitely maybe get back to you through your email or maybe ask a question directly to you. So with this, we come to the, So with this, we come to the end of this session. Thank you so much for explaining us, taking us through what is EEG and the types, explaining what exactly is EEG-based BCI systems, going on to the feature extraction, selection, and all the different machine learning algorithms, and many more. So I would like to express our gratitude to you, sir, for sharing your knowledge with us. With this, we come to the end of the third session, that is the first day of the FDP. It has been a very wonderful and a productive first day of 5-day long FDP program. So since this is a virtual gathering again, so I would like to present, a plug to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your invitation. It's been a pleasure to give the presentation. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's been a pleasure to give the presentation. Please, if you don't mind sending the recordings over to Dr. Mahmoud, I'd be thankful.
Yes, sir, we'll absolutely do that. And thank you so very much, sir.
You too. Okay. Take care.
Yeah. Okay. To all the participants, please note that today's session for today's day is now at a close. The attendance portal will remain open till 3:30. Kindly provide your attendance. Once the marker goes to 3:30, the attendance link will be locked and no more attendance will be taken into account. We are keeping the session open in case anybody requires the attendance link. We are reposting it as required.
So yeah, I'm back and I'm extremely sorry for the interruption. There has been a technical issue this side. Am I audible? Am I audible?
You're audible.
Yeah. So I was just saying that I would like to express our gratitude to the speakers throughout the day, and we really had a wonderful session and a very productive first day of the FDP. So with this, we come to the end of the session. Just a quick reminder that the attendance form is active now, and it would remain active only until 3:30 today. Right, so I hope we can see it in the chat box, the Zoom chat box, which has been posted here. I hope we can all see it, right? And so tomorrow sharp again at 9:30, we are going to begin our second day of the FDP. So thank you so much. Have a great day ahead.
Ma'am, yes, could you tell me that how to mark the attendance, please?
Yes, you got a form in the chat box. Could you please see that in the chat box?
Yeah,
There's a form.
actually, I see only the link of feedback. I'm not getting anywhere the attendance sheet
The
link.
attendance and the
That is
feedback is the same form.
right.
Okay.
That would be counted as your attendance. Once you fill this form, this would be counted as your
Fine.
attendance for the day.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Welcome.